In this mini lecture, we'll look at Chapter 8 on global management. These are the learning outcomes for this chapter. You may pause here to view them. So global business is just the act of buying and selling of goods and services by people from different countries. And a company that or a corporation that owns businesses in 2 or more countries is referred to as a multinational corporation. And so here is a list or just a few examples of very famous brands that we all are aware of that are multinational corporations. So there's 2 ways that we can do business globally. One is through global consistency. And this is when an MNC or multinational company has offices and manufacturing plants and distributions facilities in different countries, but uses all of the same rules, guidelines, policies, and procedures to run their businesses. And they tend to create a very standardized product across the various countries. It's much simpler, but it does have risks because you're not adapting your products to the different cultures and markets and employees. So an example of a company that uses global consistency is Toblerone. And Toblerone, no matter where you go in the world, it's the same, and they use the same processes and the same distribution and so forth across their corporation. Similarly, conversely, local adaptation is where you modify your rules, guidelines, policies, procedures, and you adapt your products to the various places you're doing business. This is a little bit more costly, but it also can provide a competitive advantage. So for example, Kit Kats in the United States and Canada are different. Kit Kats in much of the world are made by Nestle. And I believe in the United States, they're made by Hershey. They actually have different packaging. They even taste a little bit different. If you ever have a chance to get one in another country, I actually prefer the Canadian Kit Kat. I think it's the same in the UK. And so they do this because they utilize, they're actually made by different companies. They utilize different distribution. They are adapting to taste preferences, etc. Other companies, for example, McDonald's between the United States. McDonald's are famous McDonald's you know about. In the United States, it's primarily a burger joint. In India, many people don't eat beef because of religious beliefs, and so they have many more chicken products, and they have adapted their menu to that local culture. That's just a couple examples. There are some barriers when you're doing trade between various countries. So trade barriers are government-imposed regulations that usually either increase the costs or restrict the number of imported goods. This is usually done by a government, so people will prefer, or there will be more of an incentive to buy domestically made goods and services. A tariff is like a tax that's on imported goods. This is a pretty common way to create trade barriers. But there's also non-tariff barriers or non-tax methods that can increase the cost or reduce the volume. So non-tariff barriers include things like quotas, like you can bring so many in from another country, but only a certain amount. Voluntary export restraints, where companies will say, or industries will actually voluntarily put a limit on the number of products they export so that the government doesn't do it, because then they can control it a little bit more. An import standard, so it's just saying like this protects the health and safety of citizens and also is used to restrict imports. Subsidies, these are government loans, grants, and tax deferments to home companies to protect from foreign competition. And then there's different customs classifications that are assigned to different imported products that affect tariffs, and they affect the tariff and non-tariff barriers. There are also trade agreements which help to make trade a little bit more easy around the world. There's the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. It's a worldwide trade agreement. It helps to reduce and eliminate tariffs, limit government subsidies, and then also is a way to make it easier for companies to get intellectual property or like patents and copyrights in multiple countries. It doesn't allow them to get them in multiple countries at once. It just makes it easier. That's a whole other thing. World Trade Organization is the successor of GATT. It's the only international organization that deals with global rules of trade. Its main purpose is to ensure smooth trade, or that trade occurs as freely and as smoothly as possible. A lot of times what we'll see, though, instead of more on a global basis, we'll see what we call regional trade zones, which makes trade easier amongst connecting areas. And so here's some examples of regional trade zones. And you can pause here and read it, and then also look these up more if you're interested. So there's also, forms of global business. So one way to do global business is through strategic alliance, where companies come together to combine their resources, share costs, share risk, share technology, etc. So one of the strategic alliance is a joint venture, and this is where two or more existing companies collaborate, and then they create a whole new third party. So NBC Universal, Fox, and then the Disney ABC television group all came together and they created Hulu. That was an example of a joint venture, which I'm sure many of you didn't even realize as you're watching your favorite shows on Hulu. Wholly owned affiliates are when a company goes into a new country and they have foreign offices, facilities, and manufacturing plants that they 100% own. They haven't partnered with anybody. A global new venture is companies that are founded and have a very active and very methodical global strategy, and they're really looking at expanding globally. You can also do business globally through exporting, where you maybe make your products and services in one country and then you sell them in another. Cooperative contracts. This is where a foreign business owner pays a company a fee for the right to do business in their country. And this can include licensing or franchising. So for example, if you buy a t-shirt that has your favorite Marvel characters on it, most likely that t-shirt is not made by Marvel or Disney. It's probably made by a third party who pays to use those images and put them on a shirt, and that's licensing. And franchising is where you expand by having independent owners who purchase a franchise. So for example, Anytime Fitness, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, and Subway are all franchises, and they're owned by individuals or smaller corporations, and they pay the home company like Anytime Fitness, McDonald's, etc. to use their processes and their marketing and so forth. And that's another popular way to have global growth. There's also a strategic alliances, or as we're talking about strategic alliances, we can talk about joint ventures. Joint ventures is when two companies collaborate to form a third party, which we've talked about. And here's another example, is the Chery Jaguar Land Rover Automotive Company. It's one of the most successful joint venture examples in terms of international and domestic joint ventures. Originally from the UK, the Chery Automobile, a Chinese car manufacturer, started. Jaguar was originally from the UK, and then Chery Automobile, who's a Chinese car manufacturer, did business together. Jaguar Land Rover wanted to get into the Chinese market, but in order to do business in China or to manufacture your products in China, you have to have at least 50% ownership by somebody from China or Chinese company. And so they created this joint venture with Chery in order to create Jaguar Land Rovers in China to manufacture and sell them there. So we also we kind of mentioned wholly owned affiliates and global new ventures earlier. You can pause here and read this if you want some more information. So how do we know where we should go, what countries we should go in? This requires research, and it includes things like looking at where are the markets growing. We know there are places around the world where the population is growing. For example, India's population continues to grow, which is not the case in many other countries, and so it makes it potentially attractive for companies to expand to. You have to look at the purchasing power of consumers. So really, what is the relative cost of a standard set of goods and services? So if a McDonald's hamburger costs $3 here, how much is it going to cost for consumers if you're in China or India or Germany or Mexico, right? So you have to look at purchasing power and how much individuals can afford. You also have to look at how much global competition there is, and this is determined by how many and the quality of the competition in foreign markets. Other things are looking at workforce, looking at tariff and non-tariff barriers, transportation and labor costs. Is there any political uncertainty? For example, are there any conflicts happening? Is there any unrest that makes it less attractive? Policy uncertainty. Is there are laws rapidly changing? What's going on there? Are there policies that impact businesses? For example, if you want to do business in China, you have to have a Chinese partner if you're not from China. So if you're from another country, let's say that you're a Swedish-based company and you would like to manufacture and sell your products in China, then you would have to find a Chinese partner to create a joint venture or a strategic alliance. These are all things you want to take a look at. Here's just a map of some of the best countries and worst countries to do business in, and you can probably see that the developing countries, most of the green are developed countries, and most of those in red are lesser developed countries where there maybe is some unrest or there are other issues. So one of the most important things we have to do is become aware of different cultural differences. And one way that this is done is by analyzing the different cultural dimensions. This is called Hofstede. So power distance is individuals' perception of power distribution. Individualism is really kind of the degree or belief in self-sufficiency versus being more collective in nature. Masculine, feminine is really whether you're more of an assertive or nurturing culture. Uncertainty avoidance is just, do you like uncertainty? How do you deal with unpredictability? Short and long-term orientation is really your preference for immediate gratification or not. And then indulgence versus restraint is really looking at your strictness of social norms. And so Hofstede's 6 cultural dimensions actually map various countries on each of these dimensions, which can help you to understand some of the cultural nuances of that society. Again, you need to understand perceptions, understanding, and consumer behavior in different countries. You have to understand if you need to adapt or if you can standardize your products, and making sure that you're really doing your research. And then the last piece is sometimes when you're doing business in another country, a company will send its current workers to go live and work in the new country. And that can be a really great opportunity for individuals, but there's also a lot of stress and issues that come along with that, such as language and cultural trainings, making sure people understand how have an ability to speak the language, that they understand the culture, and that that you're understanding also the implications that expat assignments, called expats usually, has on their partners and families as well. And so that is chapter 8, a very brief overview of chapter 8. If you have any questions, please contact me. Thanks.